Welcome back to the Optimized Equine Podcast. Today I'm joined once again by Ivy Starnes of Ivy's Gait to answer your gated horse questions. We received some wonderful questions that I know you will find valuable whether you ride a gated horse or not. Make sure to check out episode 28 to learn more about Ivy and her work. And please remember to support the show and my guests. It only takes a moment, but it has a huge impact. Click follow, subscribe, share, rate the show, or find us on social media. You can also visit TamaraLeeBarrett.com to learn more about my coaching and consulting work. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Optimized Equine Podcast, Ivy. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thanks for having me back. It's so exciting.
Yes, we have quite a few questions that popped up, some from the last episode. So let's just dive right in. We got some really awesome questions here. And it seems like many of these questions are either about fixing the gait or finding the gait. So one of my questions from last time that I wanted to double click on in that last chat, episode 28, by the way, for anyone who hasn't listened to it yet, go check it out. You mentioned that a lot of your work in your clinics can be done from the ground, but you specifically said that fixing a trotty horse was something that you typically had to do from the saddle. So I was really curious to hear about why. And then no surprise, several of the questions we got were about trotty horses and fixing trotty horses. So let's talk about that and go from there.
Yes, that's an excellent question, both about the groundwork and just about fixing a trotty gated horse. Now, the only caveat I'm going to put in here for those that are not as familiar with gated horses, I am not claiming that I can get a walk trot canter horse to gait. Only a gated horse that is more on the trotty side of the spectrum. So with a horse that's more trotty, what's happening is the diagonal pair of legs is moving together or almost together, causing it to be pretty bouncy, and for some gated horses, really bouncy. And I hope in the future I have a different answer for this. But fixing a trotty horse, the only way that I know how to do, and this is with 20 years of practicing working with trotty horses, is to temporarily you lift the head up high temporarily. This is really important to know, that what you do in the first couple of rides is not what you do later on. So the first couple rides, you're lifting the head up, and the goal is actually to get them to hollow their back just a little bit. Because in essence, they're a little bit too round. They're a little bit too collected. And what we're trying to do is get them to sort of accidentally change their footfalls. Now, when they do change, we immediately release the reins to allow their head to go back down, and we stop and praise. And then after a few days of riding, no longer are we pulling the head up so high. We're usually just like raising our reins just a little bit, like sometimes just a little pinky finger, and that's enough to remind them. But with gated horses, so many of them, whether they're toward the pace or the trot, they're very locked into a certain movement. And to get them to change their mind and change how their feet move, we need to do a big difference. So the tricky thing is, where with pacey horses, there's quite a lot of exercises you can do from the ground and from the saddle. You can do lateral work, you can do ground poles, you can ride through water, snow, deeper footing. All of that pushes a pacey horse toward the trot. But all of those same exercises makes a trotty horse more trotty. And those exercises that I just mentioned could all be done on the ground. In hand, you can do dressage in hand and help a pacey horse. But if you do dressage in hand with the trotty horse, they're just going to get more trotty.
That makes sense. And just to clarify, if it's not clear for anyone who's not in this world, a trotty horse, it's basically doing like a regular old trot.
Yes.
And it sounds like when they have gone there, it's not a very comfortable trot. Because I mean, a trot on a normal good horse isn't uncomfortable, but this one is, because it's probably not a functional, nice, biomechanically correct trot.
Most
either.
gated horses, their trot, if they trot, it's terrible. It is
Okay.
not like a walk trot canter horse trot. It's like, think like a big dressage type trot that
Okay.
bounces you.
That is not easy to sit without
No,
some practice.
no.
Okay, you're saying currently at this time, your experience is trying to do it from the ground. They're going to get more and more trotty
Yes.
and not where you want them to go. Do you feel like that's because your seat is up there? Is that an integral part, or does that have something to do with it?
Good question. I think it's actually the fact that I can affect the head carriage, i.e., lifting the reins and pushing the horse to go forward much more effectively from the saddle
Mhm.
than from the ground. So, like, let's even say we have a 15-hand horse and we're trying to lift the head up. I mean, my hands are going to be to lift the head up as high as I would need to for a horse that's especially difficult and trotty, and to make them go forward at the same time would be extremely difficult from the ground. So it's maybe less about the seat and more about how I can affect the head and neck.
And I mean, you are at that point on both sides of the horse, and you're not limited to just that one
Yes.
side. Um,
Yes.
and also, I'm sure there almost anything is possible in an in-hand perspective when it comes to dressage. However, like we talked about in the last episode, you're trying to help these horses oftentimes in a 3-day clinic. You
Yes.
can't just build in these in-hand tools from nothing. And
Correct.
yeah, then at that point you do have to have your arm 10 feet in the air. That's not very not very convenient or fun or clear really for that matter.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
like you said, there is a lot you can do in hand in dressage. But
Mhm.
also a lot of my clients would maybe not also be ready for some of that work even if it was effective.
Right.
And so, like I said, in a 3-day clinic, how can I affect the most change in a short amount of time so that the horse and rider can make obvious progress in 3 days?
Okay, now I have a question here that I think is interesting. My horse does the broken trot on the flat, but has a nice even gait on a slight incline. What can I do to keep the gait on the flat?
It's a great question. And I know this sounds harsh. I question whether their horse is trotting or pacing. Because many times you hear that when a horse is gaiting nicely on a slight incline, it's because the horse is more toward the pacey side. And that will be something I hear all the time. Like on a slight incline, the pacey horse gaits beautifully, and then when it's flat, they pace. When it's a trotty horse or a horse with a broken trot, I would expect them to get actually more trotty on a slight incline. However, gaited horses are there to defy the rules. So let's say that in this case, the horse is doing a broken trot on the flat and is doing a nice, easy gait on an incline. Let's just, for argument's sake, say that's what's actually happening. Though, again, I question it, but that's just me because I work with so many.
Mhm.
I would do the same thing that I do for all trotty horses. I would work on a hard, flat surface, as flat as you can get. And at the walk, I lift the head up. So I'm using a snaffle or a bitless bridle. This is important here. You don't want to use a shanked bit for this part in the early training for like a few days. So you want to use a snaffle. You pull up on the reins to get the horse's head up at the walk. And as soon as their head is up, keep your hands up, cluck and squeeze to go forward, big forward, and keep the head up. Most trotty horses will go right into some kind of a gait right there. And then you would stop and praise and repeat. There are horses that are harder that you have to pull up really hard and push forward a lot. But if your horse is doing a broken trot, it's likely not going to take even very much head up to get that change. And the important thing is, as soon as you feel that change from the broken trot to something smoother, drop your hands so that the head can go back down and stop and praise. And with repetition, just like with all of the gating, if you stop and praise for the evenly timed saddle rack, that pucka pucka sound, if you stop and praise for that consistently, you're gonna get more and more of it.
Now, why are horses bred to be pacey, and when is the pace used?
It's a great question. I wonder if the person who asked this knew the answer because I don't know who asked it. Some of my followers know. So I have a theory, and there's two different theories. But one, let's address the breed that is the most pacey overall, which is going to be the Tennessee walking horses and the spotted saddle horses. My theory is if you go back 50 years, 60 years in the walking horse breed and you look at videos from that time, the horses were gaiting beautifully. And then in about the 1980s, we start to see videos of big lick in the walking horse industry. And if you're not familiar with this, you can just do a Google search, and it's something that a lot of us that advocate for horses think is horrible abuse. Walking horses are shod with big stacks. So they're stacks that are like this much. They're just on their front feet, their front hooves. They're nailed there. They don't take them off in between. They stand in stalls with these stacks on. But when you add that much weight to the front, which to get that really big elevation, if you have a horse that's bred to gait nicely, that even pucka 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 we all love, that walking horses were originally bred for, and then you get them to lift their legs that high, what happens is they start trotting. The action of the movement changes the timing of the footfall, and they would be trotting. So what I believe they did is they started to breed the horses to be pacey, so that when they added the weights and got the big action, they would actually have an evenly timed 4-beat gait. The good news is there are shows for walking horses that don't have the big lick mentality. They're flat shod classes, and those are not bad. But we've now had about 40 years of horses that were bred. The winners in the big lick circle were bred all pacey. All right. So think about that. At least 40 years, if not 50 or 60 years, starting from whenever they started that. And people often breed their horses to the horses that win grand championships. Those are the stallions that often get rebred to. And at a show barn, oftentimes the horses that don't make it, that are pacey, they're the ones that get sold. And then amateur breeders might also be the ones, rebreeding and not paying attention. And so you've gotten a lot of horses that are more pacey.
So it sounds like they're making the horse extra pacey, really breeding that in just so that they can kind of carelessly push it, right? I mean, okay. Just making sure I'm understanding that. Okay.
Now, and again, along that lines, you're going to have horses, you're going to breed two well-gaited horses to each other, and you might have a pacey one. Like we know that happens with color, with genetics. You breed and think you're going to get this great horse and you get this weird look. I mean, it happens in breeding. And then you also have breeders that maybe aren't breeding for the show ring like that, but maybe they're breeding for color. They breed two pacey horses together. Not for the reason of big lick or anything like that, maybe just because they like those two horses or those are the two horses they have. And that's going to produce a pacey horse. And you see that in all the breeds. Basically, you can see it in every single breed of gaited horse that you're going to have some that are more pacey. I deal primarily with pacey horses, probably 80%, 80 to 90% of the horses I work with are on the pacey side compared to the trotty side.
Uh-huh.
And so that can happen even just kind of on accident rather than purposefully.
Let's see here. Which type of horses are most likely to saddle rack naturally, and do they tend to be hotter horses in general?
Which horses are most likely to do the saddle rack really depends on the bloodlines. The ones that are bred specifically to do the saddle rack are going to be your Rocky Mountain horses. They are bred to do that evenly timed 4-beat movement. Now, any breed of horse can do the saddle rack. I think we talked about that in the last video. Any breed can do it and do it easily. You're going to find also more naturally gaited horses in the foxtrotter world compared to the Tennessee walking horse and the spotted saddle. Now, the question is, are they hotter? Not necessarily. No. Doing a saddle rack doesn't mean they're going to be hotter. The hotter horses tend to be those that have a lot of show bloodlines in them, where they really, literally to win in the show ring for a lot of these, they have to have so much energy compared to what a lot of us want for trail riding or pleasure riding. So you'll usually find a little bit hotter horses if it's coming from a long line of show breeding, or that hotness can come from training. So a lot of people think that a lot of that comes from the breeding, but a lot of it also comes from early training. Like if you take a horse from the certain parents, but you raise it and it's calm and it's learning from other horses that are calm and you're gentle and you're not making them rush around, that same horse might be totally different with trainers that just jump on and go and their whole goal is just to go fast.
Love it. All right, my mare goes into a bit of a broken trot when she tries to move into a faster gear. I'm being
Mhm.
told to add weight or change angles on her hooves by multiple people. Why is that not the right solution?
Great. Great question. Okay, it is very common in the past, well, and currently, to use heavier shoes or weights or change the angles of a horse's hoof to manipulate the timing of the footfall to get gait. It was what I was taught when I was first introduced horses to gaited horses when I was 16. And I was like, I don't like that. Why is it not a good solution? There's plenty of articles that talk about the torque that happens on a horse's foot when you add length to the toe. Because the breakover point is the reason they want you to have a longer toe is they're looking to change the timing of the footfalls. So if this is the foot lifting off, the breakover point is when the foot is rolling over and about to lift off. And by giving the horse a longer toe, you get more time before that breakover point happens and the foot lifts up. So they're effectively trying to keep one foot on the ground longer, either the front feet or the back feet on the ground longer. The problem comes when you have those long toes, it provides a lot of torque on the internal parts of the horse, the ligaments and the tendons. And one, that solution of a longer toe is not guaranteed to work. People do it all the time and the horse still paces or trots. Adding weights has a similar effect of increasing the torque on the end of the horse's leg. Because if you think about like the fulcrum is more where in the front legs, it's like at the shoulder or the back legs farther back, that swinging, it's like providing a lot more torque on their legs. And again, it's not guaranteed to work. It also doesn't affect or address some of the reason is why your horse is getting trotty or pacey in the first place, which is especially true for pacey horses, less true for trotty. And if your horse is doing a broken trot, that's actually one of the easiest things to fix, and you don't need weights or shoes. Now, of course, there are going to be people that will say, well, it's a temporary solution. If you make that choice, it is your choice as the owner. Absolutely. It could be temporary. You could do it and take the shoes off soon. But also, what happens when you take the shoes off or the weights off or you trim that toe back to where it should be? Is the horse going to go back to pacing or trotting? They don't have good answers for that either. And so, my solution, the way I train, is I actually train the movement I want and stop and praise when I get a different movement. And I don't want to use weights to get that. Now, there is one time when I will use weights to affect the movement. And that's not actually to affect the movement, it's more to make sure that I don't mess it up. So if I have a trotty horse and I need to put hoof boots on them, I actually make sure I put hoof boots on all 4 feet and not just the front. Because if you have a trotty horse and you do have more weight on the front, it could make them more trotty. Therefore, I put boots on all 4. And I have twice used hoof boots on the back for trotty horses just to see if it would help them. It didn't.
Mhm.
So we didn't stay with that. And also, hoof boots weigh only boots I use, the Cavallos, weigh only 1 ounce more than a regular metal shoe. So they're not weighted in that sense.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I was almost thinking like it's possibly more of an awareness thing
Yes.
than an actual weight thing because they can
Yes, like
feel it.
proprioception, like yes,
Yeah.
bringing their attention to that rather than a weight, and again, the horses get used to it really fast. You know, if you've ever seen a horse or a dog, you put a boot on the back and they, like, walk like this really fast, but then in a few steps, they don't do it. Very
I think that's a
similar with
really good point for this whole quote unquote solution.
yeah,
That's a
so
really
they
good
can get
point.
used to that change very quickly, and then they compensate for it, and you often lose the benefit of it.
I've had many episodes with an equine osteopath, and we're always talking about how the body is just like a master at workarounds, for better or worse. Sometimes it's amazing and perfect, and other times it's not, because the body will just work around and
Nice.
basically damage itself because it is in some way the path of least resistance.
Oh, I love that. Can I address that really quickly? Because
Yes,
that's a
please.
question I get asked. They're like, if my horse is pacing or doing a stepping pace, why can't I just let them do it? Isn't that what the horse wants to do? And to your point, the body could be harming itself without even realizing it. And so when the horse is pacing and their head is up and their back is hollow, it doesn't matter if that's what the horse wants to do. With a rider on their back, the horse is being damaged
Hmm.
if the horse hasn't
Yeah.
been properly built up in strength. So I'm just gonna, if the back is hollow and there was a rider on, it's hard for the horse to move well and not have damage to the spine and the joints.
Yep, and the body will damage itself, especially when that nervous system is not in a great place. Something to think about. Okay, so does a saddle gait evolve into a foxtrot at a slightly faster speed? This was technically kind of asked twice. It sounds to me like they're saying, do you just get it and go faster?
So I'm going to answer this maybe two ways. When you speed up a saddle rack, if your horse hasn't been conditioned to go faster, they will most likely break to whichever side of the spectrum they more naturally are comfortable. So if it's a more pacey horse, you go faster, they're going to break to the pace. If they're on the trotty side, they could break more toward the trot or the foxtrot. However, that's not because that's what should happen. A saddle rack can go from about 5 miles an hour, maybe a little slower at 4.5 miles an hour, all the way up to the speed rack faster than 13 miles an hour. So when I train gaited horses and we're looking for speed, I don't allow them to break into a foxtrot. We only go fast if they can hold that saddle rack or saddle gait. So if you're trying to train the foxtrot, you wouldn't start with a saddle rack because they're not, you can train both things, but one doesn't lead to the other. You would train a foxtrot maybe more from a walk using ground poles to get your horse more square or trotty, same thing, and develop that foxtrot that way, not from a saddle rack.
And I assume that that question pops up that way because maybe for some horses that works, speeding up, and they do just naturally get there. I
It's
don't know.
not normal. That's not
No?
actually
Okay.
normal in my experience.
Okay.
I never discount what someone else has found. So, like, the fact that someone has been like, my horse does a foxtrot when I speed up the saddle rack, 100% that could happen. That's rare, though.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, some of these next questions were not so much about fixing the gate, but more about finding the gate. I think I'm going to say all three of these questions, and then you can take it from there, because I suspect that their answers might be related. So, one of them is about hearing. How can you tell what gate your horse is in? I swear I hear pucka 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 no matter what she does. The next one is, how can you feel if your horse is gaiting under saddle? And then finally, what do you change, like speed, etc., to achieve the perfect tempo for a balanced gait where the rider is stable and quiet? And what cues do you look for to know it's right?
The first one, let's address the sound of paka paka paka. You're actually going to be the first to hear about this. With a friend of mine, he has developed, and it's not done yet, an app that will train your ear to the different gaits.
Nice, that's
So
cool.
you will be able to just play a sound of a specific gait. And you'll also be able to do training where it plays a sound and you can click on a button to say which movement you think it is. So I'm very excited. We're going to roll that out soon, I think. I just need to get some pieces done on my end. So a lot of people, if you're not sure about the pucka pucka, I've worked with riders that do have a really hard time hearing that. And other than potentially trying this training app that we're coming out with, I don't know how to help other than keep watching videos where it's actually paka paka, where it's even, like the videos that I share. And or say it out loud while you're riding. Say paka 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 paka, because often it won't line up quite right if it's not quite even. It'll be that puck 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 puck. And your goal is to train your ear to do it perfectly. And if you're still not sure, the best thing is to ride on a hard surface and get someone to video for you, video what you're doing and double check. Maybe you are gating. So that would be what I would say for that answer. Is I know some people do struggle to hear it. But let's move into what do you feel? The tricky thing with that question is all gaited horses feel differently under saddle.
Hmm.
They are a complex problem because no two horses are the same. Not even in the same breed, not even the two pacey horses feel the same. So, a gait, one of the ways I tell people to start checking in is what are your shoulders doing? Are your shoulders bouncing? If they're bouncing at all, you're likely not gaiting well. You're not there yet. If your shoulders are bouncing, you still have to determine if your horse is pacey or trotty. And that takes either videoing it and looking back or having someone actually give you live feedback so you can learn to distinguish. Now, a pace, there are some things to visually watch for. The head could move side to side, like between the pole could move side to side in the pace. Your body might move side to side, though that's less common. And some people say that if you look down at your saddle horn, if you have a saddle horn, it will be going side to side as well. Those are all signs that your horse could be in a pace or a stepping pace. If your horse is trotting, you'll probably feel much more up movement. And to me, it almost feels like the back of the saddle is like pushing me up and forward, different from the pace. Now, if you're riding and you still can't tell the difference, one of the things I would recommend is go faster. Some horses will be pretty smooth and comfortable if you stay really, really slow. You're almost walking, almost gaiting right there. If you aren't sure, you need a little more energy. And then it will almost always exaggerate what the horse is doing. So could you read that last question
Yes.
again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what do you change, like speed, etc., to achieve the perfect tempo for a balanced gait where the rider is stable and quiet? And what cues do you look for to know it's right?
Okay, so the first thing is for a balanced ride, a couple things have to happen. One is the horse can't go too fast or too slow. And that's going to be a sweet spot that's different for every horse. They need to have a level ish head and be consistent in that. So you can't have the head going up, down, up, down, up, down. And those are things that I work on immediately when I get on a horse. I have a horse that just came for training this week, and her head would go up, down, and her speed would change constantly. Slow down, speed up, slow down, speed up. And so I ride her on a circle, working on softness, consistent head carriage, like carrying the head here, not up here, and controlling her speed. And just doing that, nothing else, just riding in a circle for 30 minutes, working on consistency. And then when she gets it right or she lowers her head, I stop and praise. So it's not constant riding and wearing her out. In 3 days, she started to gait already. The way I know a horse is gaiting is a lot of practice. So one is feel, but I really, really go off of the sound. Where I was riding this week is just like dirt and grass. So it's fairly hard packed right now because it's been dry. And I can hear the footfalls just enough and have a really good feel for a horse to know that she's carrying herself well. And that only comes with practice. Usually someone giving you live feedback, like, that's it, that's it, that's not it, that's not it, that's pacing, that's it, that's it. And then your body starts to sort of memorize the feel. But the trick is, it'll be different for every horse.
That is exactly why I kind of thought that it would be a group together answer because I assume that it is a different prescription that every horse needs to
Yes.
find their way. Um, and the getting feedback, like what, like you said, whether it's live right then in a lesson or something like that, or watching back your videos or getting advice from someone through those videos. I think it's the only
One,
way is practice, And
yeah,
because
and
if
I,
you're not getting help with your practice, you're practicing questioning yourself,
yeah,
and that you can't feel anything, if you're questioning yourself.
a lot of riders say the exact same thing. They're like, I'm not sure. And so then they kind of beat themselves up and aren't sure that they can feel the right movement. And then they don't know when to stop and praise. And they're working hard, right? They're trying their very best to make progress and do the best for their horse. I've started to do a lot more virtual lessons. And that right there, the feedback that I told you is like, that's gating. Yes, yes, yes. That's pacing, that's pacing. The rider's able to now go, okay, I thought so. Now I know for sure.
Questioning ourselves, it's so important, and yet so detrimental at times as well.
Yes.
So, okay. There was several questions about gear, bits, headgear, also a question about tack and hoof boots, but let me start with this one and we'll go from there. And that was just, can you please comment on riding gaited horses bitless?
I love Bitless. All of my personal horses are Bitless, but it's a choice that people have to make. I tend to train a lot. I love training. And so, for example, my quarter horse that I've owned his whole life, he's 21 years old. We've done mounted patrol, we've done Renaissance fairs, we've done all kinds of things where there's a lot of stuff going on. And he's been ridden exclusively bitless his whole life. And I take him to some high energy things, but I train him to be soft. The biggest thing with training bitless is you have to understand that it takes about 3 times as long to train something as with a bit. And so now there are exceptions. If you have a horse that's more fine boned, long, skinny neck, sort of petite, they're going to learn and be soft much faster than if you have a horse with a big, thick neck and thick head. I don't know what it is, but if you have a gelding that's like that, like really solid, you might be fighting an uphill battle. That doesn't mean don't do it, but it means recognize that it'll take extra effort. But aside from that, training in a bitless, once your horse is soft, the training progresses exactly like if you had a bit, but emphasis on your horse needs to be soft. That means that if you're riding and your reins are loose and then you pick up your reins to take up contact, your horse needs to respond somehow immediately. Usually, first we'd like to see them tuck their nose a little bit, and you'd also like to see them, if you hold that contact, offer a speed change. What I find for people that often ride bitless and they come to a clinic and they're riding bitless is the horse is very, very bracy. It means when you pick up that contact, they either go faster or they do nothing. And they may do nothing for kind of an hour. They may just not want to respond. And in that case, you need to be very careful before you attempt to do bitless. Or if you're in the middle of it and your horse isn't soft, go back to working on it. But again, once you've got that softness, the progression is the exact same as if you have a bit. And I see no issues. Horses can gait fantastic bitless.
Now, the next question, which you answered a piece of with your personal horses, is do you have a bit preference?
So I do have preferences for bits, but I also totally understand that there are factors that I'm not in control of. So, for example, I'm a really good rider and I could ride a horse in maybe a bit with less control or less leverage and be safer than a rider who's less experienced. And safety for the rider does matter. I'll tell you the 3 bits that are my favorite. The Rockiness raised bit, and that's very similar to a snaffle, but can't technically be a snaffle, but there's not really leverage. Then the missing link snaffle is a really nice sort of solid snaffle with a cricket. And the cricket is wonderful for horses that have anxiety because they can roll that cricket and it gives them something to do, a way to kind of release that stress. I've had a lot of really good success with that bit.
Yeah, it's and I wouldn't reserve it just for anxious. Some horses wouldn't identify as anxious, but are just really still. They're just not very active there, and it's so great for opening that up a little bit. Love it.
Yes, no, yeah, that's a good point. I don't just use it for anxious horses. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I try it with a lot of horses, and the reason some of the 3 bits I'm gonna mention all have different mouthpieces, and I think that's actually key because I think a lot of riders stick with one style mouthpiece and don't try a lot of different ones, and that's actually what we're looking for, something that feels comfortable to the horse. And then the other bit, the shanked bit that I like is the McGregor releasing bit. I used to sell this, and then the manufacturer retired, which is a bummer. So I need to find someone new to make it. But I'm sold out because people really like this bit. It has a small shank. It's a mullen mouth, so that's just got a slight curve, and it helps the horse to tuck their nose and keep their body to keep their head and neck in a good position to help get gait without having to have constant contact. There are other good bits out there. Myler makes good bits, though often I don't like them as much as the McGregor releasing bit, but they do have quality bits. Like they're not just going to pinch your horse. The list is much longer for the bits that I don't like. Yeah, I will say, the Rockin' raised bit now has a Chinese knockoff. I think because I made it popular and it sold so many. So watch out. There is like a $50 version of that bit, and it is not the same as the authentic Rockin' raised bit.
Okay, and another question about bits here. How do you determine what is the best for your horse and whether or not to use shanks for leverage? So obviously you do, you just mentioned one, so let's talk a little bit more about that.
How I determine a bit for a horse, I'm not a bit fitter per se. I'm going off of the horse's reaction. So I'll try some of the bits that I have, see how the horse reacts. We've definitely done clinics where we tried like 3 or 4 different bits on a horse to try to find a mouthpiece that works. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a mouthpiece that seems comfortable to a horse, meaning when you touch the reins, they're not throwing their head, which definitely can be training sometimes. But overall, does it seem comfortable to them? Which is why I'm picky which bits that I have, because I want to make sure that it's not going to be causing harm just by having it in the horse's mouth. To use a shank or not to use a shank. Let me tell you what happened yesterday or this week. So I'm working with a horse and I was started him riding in a snaffle, but and he started gaiting. He's been doing a lot of gaiting. That's Pretzel. I just posted a video of him gaiting on the road today. But he was getting a little bracy, and the braciness was affecting his gait, meaning he was putting his head up and he was getting pacey, and it was affecting my ability to get him to gait longer so I could stop and praise. And I'd already done the softness training. I'd already spent the training time. So I am temporarily riding him in the McGregor releasing bit. It has short shanks, so the shanks are only like this long. And yesterday was the first day I rode him in it, and he did phenomenal because that bit was designed to help the horse tuck the nose easily and put the head down. And I could now ride on a much looser rein, but correct him before he got too bracy and high headed, allowing him to gait longer and longer. I've done that before in training, and then I'll often try to transition back to a snaffle after about a week. So we'll see how that goes with him. But the other reason to use a shanked bit is if you feel like your horse is going to get really strong or dangerous on the trail. And that is a legitimate reason to put a shanked bit in to be safe. So some people will train in the arena with a snaffle or something with less leverage and then go on the trail and ride with leverage just to make sure they stay safe. What I do tell people is if you're going to try to transition to a snaffle for the trail, at least bring a shanked bit with you in case it's not going well and you can switch back. But those are
Yeah.
the reasons I would ride in a shanked bit. And like even horses, if you're going to do competition like endurance or competitive trail ride, your horse that might be super calm when you ride by yourself might be really hot and you need just a little bit more to stay safe.
Let's say somebody is relying on the shank for their safety on the trail. I have said if you're relying on a shank bit to keep you safe, quote unquote, you're in more danger than you realize. Because you are, in my opinion, now amplifying this message. Now, maybe the amplification is exactly what that horse needs to stop. I also feel like it's possibly more likely to inject tension into the equation with that increased leverage. So, thoughts on that, comments on that about, if you're relying on it to stay safe, are you really safe? And is it going to be the same as those stacked shoes or whatever? Like, yeah, okay, it works for today, but now in like a year, it doesn't work anymore.
So addressing that last point. So the thing is, I agree with you, which is why I'm riding my horses bitless and I spend so much time training before I ever go to a place with a lot of energy or do that. Addressing, I think it's a very valid point that if you have to use a shanked bit now to control your horse, say on the trail or on a big trail ride, will your horse start to get more bracey against that pain? And eventually you're going to need a bigger bit and a bigger bit. I think that's a legitimate concern. And I think that's definitely happened. The way I encourage people to avoid that is to keep doing the training in kind of the arena setting. The trouble that I have, this is right, this is me being really honest, is a lot of my clients hate training. They're not like you and I. They don't even want to ride 15 minutes in an arena. And if they do, they're like, I don't even know what to do. And I totally understand that part of it. And so I try to give people like, this is actually what you do, and it will make your ride better. Because yes, there's this idea that people that argue against bitless or riding with the snaffle. So there's a couple things. If you're relying on the bigger bit to stop your horse, you do have to realize that it works because you can cause more pain. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that you do have to realize that that's why it works. And ethically, I think we have to wrestle with that question. I think everyone has to recognize that and wrestle with it and figure out where they can be. And again, I do work with riders. Some riders are like, yeah, I had shoulder surgery. My arm is really weak. And do I really want to go to them and say, look, you can't ride outside the arena because you can't stop your horse in a snaffle in an emergency? I would highly encourage they train their horse to be really soft so that that emergency isn't likely to come up or not have to pull hard. But I would be reluctant to be the one that says, you can't ride with a shanked bit. But I think the balance of that is, if we want that good relationship with our horse, we should be working on softness as much as we're relying on that bit. That maybe didn't make sense, but the idea is like, definitely be doing the training so that you don't end up relying on that full amount of leverage.
The thing that's better for the relationship is the safer thing as well at the end of the
That's a
day.
great way to
Now,
say it.
it's not an easy or quick process necessarily.
Yeah, it's something to work toward. Like, there are people that want to ride bitless, but they don't feel that they have control enough to stop their horse bitless right now, which is, again, legitimate concern. And my solution is, well, then just train it. There was a question on a page recently. They said, if you had a perfect bit for a horse and a perfect bitless bridle, so like they fit perfectly, right? They're perfect for the horse. And the horse stops with less pressure with the bit and a little bit more pressure to stop with the bitless bridle, which is more ethical to use. Now, not going to answer that question here, but a lot of people's answer online was, I would do more training. And I think I kind of agree. I would be like, I would do more training, but I also see a perspective of some bits are better signaling bits, like a shanked bit. That, like, so think about a spade bit, which I'm not advocating my gaited riders use. The idea is you're not supposed to be pulling on it, but like, the horse should be able to feel little changes to your rein position just because of the bit. But a lot of riders aren't riding with that kind of subtlety.
In a way, I feel like for the writers who are, that question is sort of like saying, what's more ethical, an email or a phone call? Like, what? But I totally agree that a majority of the world is not using it in that way.
It's a good question, and it's a good thing for people to keep wrestling with. Keep thinking about it, keep pushing yourself and where you want to be with your own horse.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we'll move on to some contact and softness questions. This one says, when is it best to ride a horse with light contact on the bit versus when to ride on a looser rein?
I personally want to ride my gaited horse on a loose rein. Now, that only happens because of training early on. So in early training, I'm always keeping my reins shorter. Now, that doesn't mean contact constantly, but my reins are shorter so that I can sort of manage where the horse's head is and the speed. If you're trying to get your horse to gait and they like constantly speed up and slow down and speed up and slow down, I'll shorten my reins to try to keep that horse right in that sweet spot. Once the horse is starting to do a nice job, they're starting to gait, I start to give a loose rein. Like that's my goal, loose rein. That changes if you're going to show. So I recently rode a stallion in a gaited show, and they expect you to have light contact, and I'll do that in the show ring. But when I'm training this specific horse at home, I'm not riding with that much contact. I'm not training with that much contact. So my answer is my goal is to always ride on a loose rein, but you don't start with.
I want to throw this in there since you mentioned the show thing, because somebody did specifically ask on about getting a headset on their gaited horse because they're planning on showing. Would you say at a certain point it's just available because of the training you've been doing on the loose rein?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the short answer.
I thought you might say that.
You nailed it. With the softness training and ultimately the strength training that you're doing with your horse, that they can gait on their own, you should be able to now gather the horse up very easily. It should be super easy. And what I would do if you were prepping for a show is to do it little by little, just like we train the gait, where you gather your horse up into let's just call a show frame. Let's just call it that because we know it's not our trail ride. Your show frame, hold it for a couple seconds, then release to kind of go on a loose rein again. Gather them up, hold for a few seconds, loose rein. And you repeat that until the horse starts to get stronger and stronger, being able to hold that longer and longer.
One of the things that I think I briefly touched on in the last episode was on the tuck the nose thing. So, softness training, you're calling that. And we talked a little bit about how that is just the beginning, like a tuck, it doesn't end there, but it is an important step, especially for a horse that's not a blank canvas. I have definitely experienced horses that they feel the bridle, they tuck the nose, but they're not actually there having a conversation with you. And it's not actually connected to their body. It's just like this little like head bob thing going on. And there's not real changes transferring through the rest of them. So how do you address that in your program? I'm assuming that's something you've seen before.
Yeah, I've got one for training right now that's very similar to that. The nose is definitely not as connected to the body as other horses. And there's a lot of that, like tucking too far, but I'm not doing, she's doing on her own. And so this is a tricky question because this is where the amount of time you have kind of dictates how you address it. So if I'm at a clinic, I'm going to address it by saying the horse is tucking too much. They're not really, it's not their whole body. Some of that is I'm going to push for forward. We're going to ask for softness and a lot of forward. So we're going to use the forward, the impulsion to drive the hind end on a loose rein to allow that horse to kind of get out of that being tucked too far under. That's what I do in the short term. Like when you at a clinic and I'm like, I can't just fix this immediately. And you'll often see that with horses with longer, skinnier necks, though it can happen with any horse can learn to do that. So the softness and the tucking the nose, yes, it's the beginning. If you're starting with a blank canvas and you train the softness or tucking the nose, breaking at the pole, and you're always releasing afterwards, you're rarely going to get a horse that's going to be that way because you're not holding them in a frame. And the trick is I don't often get to work with horses like this long term. So I don't have this put together answer other than I probably would do more lateral work and some strength training. I've been doing with my horse Firefly, like teaching her to lean back and lift her withers on the ground. And I think a horse like that would really benefit from groundwork, like in hand work. I say in hand work because I don't just mean lunging. I mean
Hmm.
actually like long and low with the nose out, going over poles, things that help the horse lift the back and use the body, sort of start to realize that the body is all together. But I'm curious,
Hmm.
what would you do in those situations?
Well, when you were just saying the rock back, that's exactly what I would do. I teach that whether it's on the ground or from the saddle, like yes, maybe if it needs to be just a nose at first, but then it's not going to stay there long before it's like, this is actually a whole body conversation if that's not. To some horses, that's just like, duh, of course you're talking to all of me. And other horses are just, that's not what occurs to them. So, yeah, I would teach that rock back from the ground or the saddle or both, depending on the situation. And I feel like that in itself would solve it. If once they know how to do that, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, then they're just reading with you, go whatever
So,
direction you want to go.
yeah, so can you I'm curious, how would you do that like under saddle and on the ground? Can you give us a really brief overview?
If it's a horse that as soon as you take the feel and they're just like, they usually can't stand still. They usually like they
Yes.
start to dance around and do all the things. So if they can't stand still, for me, it is important that we figure out how to rock them to whichever corner I need them to rock to. So I think of each leg as
Okay.
a corner, and I want to
Okay.
know that I can rock them to whichever corner I want at a standstill. And that type of horse may not stay standing still. They start to dance and throw all these things at you. It's gonna come back to the standstill for that horse. But I mentioned in the last episode as well, uh, you can definitely overdo it at a standstill and cause a little bit of a mind-blowing problem for a horse that gets really flustered when you go to try to do it in motion. But ultimately, one way or the other, we got to get it at the standstill, whether that's the hard thing for that horse or that's easy. And then once they've got it at a standstill, I think it's pretty easy in motion to say, "Well, hey, rock your weight from here to here, or whatever corner we're trying to move
Okay.
to."
Yeah.
And if they don't, then we just halt and we do it at the halt. And then we walk again until it starts to be available in motion.
Yes. I love that because I've not done that before. I need you to like give me a virtual lesson.
I have some videos that would be helpful, or that I'm happy to do that as well. But essentially, yes, you're teaching them to rock from the bit or whatever the heck you use. You can do
Yes.
it from a halter, a bit, a bitless, whatever. At the end of the day, they have to just know where to put their weight. And then if they are thinking it's up in their head, it's going to be taken care of. They've already learned,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you're not just talking to my face.
And what would you say if people are like, if I put a feel on the reins, my horse will just back up right away? What what would you do then?
So to me, that's really important to fix because, I mean, it's not the worst problem to have. I'd rather have that than a horse that doesn't stop like all day. But I think if they can't, it goes back to getting them to understand it at the standstill. I don't mean to repeat that
Yes.
again, but
That's
like
okay.
if they're, it's no different whether if they go backward endlessly or forwards or sideways. At the end of the day, they have to find it at a standstill because then it's the only way that you can both be clear that like this is about your weight in space right here, not like moving. Yes, you're moving, but it's about your weight right above your legs.
Okay. Yes.
So if they are flying backwards, we're going to just maybe I just let them. Maybe I stay exactly the same within reason, of course. I have a feel.
Yes.
Maybe I keep that exact feel and I let them go where they're going to go until they stop. Maybe they only stopped because they backed into a fence. Well,
To a
that's
wall.
okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
If we get the answer, we release then, we repeat. They want to find the right answer. They
Oh,
will
yes.
get there. I think a lot of
I
times
love that.
those scenarios just come from all I'm doing is not questioning myself. I don't change what I'm saying to them when the horse throws something weird at me. That's where having a trainer and help is like just so important.
Yes.
Certainly not perfect,
Yeah.
and it still happens to me now where something will come up and at the end of the day, what's the solution? Oh, you just keep reacting to what they're doing. Just say that, just be consistent. Say the same thing, they'll
Yes.
find it.
Yes. Yeah, and I feel like that, like this horse that I got this week, that's what I've done riding her in circles, is I'm just being consistent. I'm asking, can you soften, put your head a little lower, and keep a consistent speed, even while she's throwing different behaviors out there.
Hmm. Yeah, if we change the question every time they throw us an answer, it's really hard for everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's for sure. So, and I'll throw this in here now because I kind of was something I jotted down when you were talking. But even if someone doesn't intend to ride on contact, like you're saying, your goal is to ride on a loose rein, and I know that you would agree with this. But for anybody out there who's like, I don't need contact, whatever, I just do this or that, and I like the loose rein thing. If your contact isn't good, your horse is not going to be as good off on a loose rein. Like, just period. If you are going to ride on a loose rein almost all the time, but you touch it and now that creates some kind of tension or confusion, you better learn how to ride bridleless then. Because
I think you could teach my class sometimes because, yes, I have riders that come and they ride only on a loose rein. And then when you gently, like I said, take a soft feel, there's immediate tension and not a little bit, a lot. The
Mhm,
horse doesn't know what to do with the contact. They either react by simply bracing or throwing their head. Like it could be a big reaction.
mhm.
And at that point, like you said, the loose rein is not an example of quality relationship or training with the horse. I tell people, like, when they see me riding on a loose rein, it is from lots of work training the horse what the correct response to the reins should be. Not because I
Yeah.
started out throwing the reins away and didn't teach the horse to ride well. So, yes, you nailed it. Exactly.
And it is not a sin to have short reins. Just because you
No.
see it done so poorly so often does not mean it is unethical in itself. It is how it is
Yeah,
done.
well, I posted a video of me riding the stallion Natty just up and down the road. I've got a costume on, and you can see my reins are short. He does have a higher headset. My reins are short rather than floppy because but you can see the quality of the contact, the softness that's still there. There's not a death grip. There's no tension because I've got my reins short. It shows the quality that he's got in that moment because he knows how to be soft and how to react nicely.
And to circle it back, we'll complete the circle here. They know how to do that when the contact applies to their whole body and they don't get stuck thinking it's just in their face. When they know what that means to their whole body, horse doesn't mind contact, as long as you're using it kindly and they know what it means. They don't mind, no problem. Someone did ask the steps you use to teach the rock back or the sit down with your horse.
Essentially, because I come from a background of clicker training, I'm thinking of training a behavior and training a behavior by breaking it down into very, very small approximations. So with Firefly, I do have a big horse bean bag, but you can do this with 2 or 4 small squares of hay as well. So I put it in a corner of a pen that's solid metal. Nothing's going to move or break. That's important. And you can do the same thing with some hay bales and cover the bales with blankets. So you want to make sure that it's not poking the horse. And essentially what I'm doing is first I ask her to back up. Now with Firefly, I did it only using positive reinforcement. You can do this with a halter and lead rope as well. But the important thing is that you understand that it's definitely not about forcing the horse to do it. With Firefly, I used a target. So she already knew what the target was. So I put the target to ask her to back up. And at the beginning, I just reinforced her for backing up to the beanbag. So, like, yes, that's where I want you to be. So, if you have a horse and you have a halter and a lead, and they back into the corner and their legs touch the beanbag, stop and praise. Because that's kind of scary for some horses to back up into something. Some horses that will be easy. For some of your horses, that will be hard. And if that's hard for them, do lots of praising. Don't be in a rush to get to the next step. If that's easy for your horse, what we're doing is I'm trying to get them to rock backwards a little bit at a time. So the beginning, I look at like the loins, so the lower back. I'm looking for that to like those muscles to activate when they lean back. That happens very quickly. They don't have to lean back very much for that to happen. And try this for like 5 minutes a day. It's really easy to be like, oh, that's so exciting and you want more, but don't push it on this one. And then I started to look for her not to like throw her head up, like to tuck her nose just a little, not like overbent, but like not putting her head up so much. And then once they like she's got the lean back, but it's like very stiff. It'll look like their legs are like they just kind of lean back and they're stiff. The next thing I watch is the hip and I look for the pelvis to tuck. So they lean back and I wait for like you just see that like the muscles sort of clench. Like think about like clenching your butt. Like that's what I'm looking for. And she tucks and I stop and praise for that. And this took a lot of sessions. I have to go back and count. I videoed every session, I think except for one. And once she got it where she was very strong with the beanbag, or again, you can use hay bales. Once she was good at it there, I would take her forward a couple of steps. So away from the beanbag and ask her with the exact same cues if she could rock back without backing up. If your horse keeps backing up, then I would take them back to their corner and do it until they could do it. And then once she could do it a few steps away, then I took her away from the corner completely and started asking for it on the ground. And I can also get it under saddle as well, because once she understood it really well on the ground, it was really easy to transfer to the saddle.
It kind of reminded me of a piece of that I didn't specifically say, but I'm guessing this is a piece in your pelvic tuck as well. So when I was talking about the rocking thing and a
Yes.
horse that wants to back up. So I think the other half of that you use to balance out with that horse is the ability to telescope from a standstill. I'm referring to their
Yes.
neck. So they have to learn from a standstill to rock this way and also how to telescope, lengthen the neck, open the throat latch without
Yes.
just walking
Okay.
off. If you've got those two buttons, gosh dang, you can do almost anything
Yeah.
with it.
So actually, that's a good point. So I actually don't have that at the halt. That's not something that I put a specific behavior on, but I could do it really easily. So now I
Hmm.
should probably do that today and then show you how I would train it because we all have our different spin. But what I
Yeah.
did do, I spent last year teaching Firefly to go long and low at Liberty, walk and trot and gait like really well, really long
Hmm.
and low, telescoping. So I wasn't taking a tense horse and getting that rock back. I was taking a horse that was really good at long and low and then go up. And yes, what I need to be doing is practicing the up with the long and low because that, you're right, that's the beautiful balance. So I'm going to work on that. If not today, then tomorrow. And I'm going to make a video. I love that. So on the ground, how do you cue, either on the ground or on the saddle, how do you cue the telescoping?
So one thing that I don't have a good answer on the cue because I am
Okay.
definitely
Okay.
I struggle with cues. In fact, the person I'm working with the most right this moment with lessons is getting me back to it because there's so much value into it. I'm not saying like, oh, feel based is the better way.
You should.
No, no, no. But do I currently use a cue for that? I do not. I am just using feel based. I like bits, but probably for this reason, because I'm not using cues, because I am relying on these little vibrations in my fingers and things like that. So I would say I am having a conversation with that horse's tongue until they find it. I know that's
Okay.
a vague
Okay.
answer, but that's because
It
again
makes
of
sense to me.
my field-based obsession and not my non-cues. But that being said, it's not required to have a bit either. I mean, I can teach a horse to telescope in a halter too. So it's about shifting. Well, let me say this another way. When they know how to get their weight off their front legs and they know how to rock it back, it kind of just falls out the telescope. You know what I mean? When they're not holding
Yes.
themselves here, the neck just falls out and it's there. You just have to teach the horse that this feels good and it's desirable. So they're like,
Yes.
win-win. Let's
Yes.
do it, you
I
know?
love it.
And so if you are someone that wants to do cues, super easy. I mean, you could just build it in and put your cue on. I just don't have a great answer there. We'll wait for your
No,
video on that one.
yeah, well, and mine's going to be all clicker training based, which you can still do without the clicker and the food, right? It's still
Mhm.
training. It's just going to look different than maybe what everybody else will do. That's really interesting. Yeah. Now I'm like, okay, I should teach her a little bit more of that.
I guess the important thing to say, telescoping is not just a low head.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, so once they
Like an
learn,
open throw latch.
yeah, and so once they learn that, that's what makes riding on short reins possible nicely with a comfortable horse. They learn, like, oh, I just
Yes.
readjust this here. Ooh, oh, look, I just telescope, but I didn't throw my head on the floor.
Because collection is supposed to be the horse taking more of their weight on the hind end and lowering the hindquarters by bending the joints. And I think I can't remember if we touched on this last time, but that's a big misunderstanding in the gaited world is they think collection means headset and a horse stepping farther under themselves. But in their cases, the horses are stepping under themselves with extension and not collection. It's
Mhm.
not, it's more like balancing than it is shortening the steps so they can take the weight. Yeah, that's fun. Cool stuff.
Hey, let's see. This one says, how can you help a vet determine lameness with a gaited horse? I can hear when the gait is off, but identifying which foot is much harder for me.
Well, there's a very simple answer to this. It's actually to teach your horse to trot in hand. So if you do NATRAC, competitive trail ride, that's the North American Trail NATR Trail Rider Conference, something like that. That's what I just competed in. You, for check in and check out, you trot out in a straight line, circle at the trot, circle to the right, circle to the left, trot back. Okay. And my friend Chrissy, she trains her gaited horses to do that at a trot. So she spends time to train the horses to trot in hand and trot on the lunge line, which makes it easy for a veterinarian to see because it is difficult for veterinarians because they don't know if the head nod is supposed to be there with a gaited horse or if the horse is actually lame. And it's something that I really do want to create is a video sort of lesson for veterinarians to see like this is a gaited horse but this is lame and show them why, and then here's a gaited horse that's not lame and still has a head nod. But the biggest answer is actually spend time training a trot in hand.
That is such a good answer for a lot of things because that's something that it's frustrating when it comes to like pre-purchases or lameness exams. You know, yeah, if you pull a horse along like this with a rope, like it's not moving, certainly not its best, and you're just not seeing a complete picture. And I know some more in-depth things may include like a ridden evaluation. I think it needs to because, man, what a lot of vets base their decisions off of is a lot of times bad handling practices, really, you know. I mean, it's not the only factor. I'm not saying it is, but it's a factor for sure.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Now, this question, I have a KMSHA. I can only imagine this is a Kentucky
Kentucky Mountain Saddle
Mountain.
Horse.
Okay.
Yep, good
Whose
call.
left heel grows faster than the other feet. So we trail ride very rough terrain. She wears shoes, but after a while, this seems to mess up her gait. I'm thinking of trying hoof boots, but I'm worried they won't stay on. Do you have any other suggestions?
So I'm not sure why the shoes are messing up the gait. So if I was talking to that person or having a dialogue, that would be my question. I'd say, can you elaborate on that? There are definitely hoof boots that I think would probably fit your horse. But also, if you didn't want to go the hoof boot route, glue on shoes are really nice these days. They're lighter than metal shoes. There are so many options right now whether you're going to do hoof boots or glue on shoes. So I love Cavallo hoof boots, but they don't do as well if your horse has a high heel. So in that case, I would look at Renegades and Scoot boots. And in terms of knowing if it'll work for your horse, I would try to talk to a rep and see if they can help you like fitting with a high heel or glue on shoes would be my next suggestion. There's some that you can do yourselves. Do some good research because there's options I think that are easier and harder. And I think there is a learning curve if you do it yourself, or you do need to find a farrier that's pretty good at it. Because if they don't do a good job, the glue-ons will come off. I used it for one of my horses. He went a full 6 or 7 weeks and he didn't pull them at all. They stayed on perfectly. They worked really well. we reset them and with no issues, reused them.
I've had some great success with glue-ons and also some horses that was very hard to keep them on. It seems like the hoof shape and how that shoe fits before you glue it on definitely makes a big difference in addition
Yes.
to your environment and all the other factors. I assumed when I read this question and she was talking about it, it seems to mess her up after a while. I assumed that this was referring to like farther into the shoe cycle. So perhaps as that foot grows longer at the end of the cycle, that's when she's having the
Yeah.
most issues. And one
And
benefit I would just add to that is if you don't have shoes on, you could be touching up yourself in between on that one
yes,
foot. It
yes,
sounds like she gaits when she's freshly done, so you could help keep
that's a
the
great
treble
point.
foot at looking that way.
Yeah, if you could find the right boot. My friend was using scoot boots on her mare, kept losing them at competitive trail rides, switched to renegades, all good. Unfortunately, it means it's not a cheap prospect necessarily to find the right boot for your horse.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you can find a representative near you that might have used ones for you to try out, maybe not. It's hard.
Yeah. I can say from my experience with some endurance riders, ask an endurance rider if they have some you can try on because they had
That's great.
like a bucket in their trailer of all these different sizes and brands to try. There's a lot of options out there. All right, well, we will wrap it up. Ivy, thank you so much. This has been fun. Where can people find you to follow along and ask more questions for part three?
Yes, I would love a part three. You can follow me on social media. I'm most active on Facebook, but I'm also on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. So if you look for Ivy's Glide Gait or Ivy Starnes, that's going to come up. And I love talking with people, answering questions. I'm posting videos all the time there. And you can see my complete clinic schedule there as well.
And I saw you have quite a few clinics coming up, including some in the UK. That's exciting. Is that your first time going
Yes,
there?
first.
Nice, cool.
Yes, other than going to Canada, first time doing international clinics. So, and first time going to the United Kingdom as well.
Well, congrats. That's very awesome. And
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me again.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to click follow or subscribe, rate the show, and share with a friend. Visit TamaraLeeBarrett.com for more info on coaching, consulting, and links to our socials. Until next time, happy horsing.